Welcome to Today in the News here on Vanguard Live, broadcasting to you from Lagos, Southwest Nigeria. Of course, it's another beautiful Monday here in the city of Lagos, and of course, it is Vanguard here. And today is not going to be different because the program still remains newspaper review and, of course, analysis. But today we're starting off with Vanguard, and of course, we are going to be looking at what Vanguard has on its front page, and of course, it's leading with the crisis in Niger Republic. And what we have on Vanguard is ECOWAS rejects junta's 3-year transition plan. That story is on page 5 of the Vanguard. Junta once against foreign intervention. That is, of course, a rider to that story. Well, of course, you know that a lot has been happening regarding the Niger crisis. Of course, there are foreign interests, going into all of that. Of course, the United States is also talking about military intervention in that country, where we see how all of that pans out in the coming weeks. Of course, for you to read more on that story, pick up a copy of the Vanguard, and you see the story on page 5 of today's newspaper. Okay, let's look at another interesting story on the name above the nameplate of the Vanguard. I beg your pardon. And of course, that story is on page 59 of the Vanguard. Tinubu appoints Momoh as minister designate for Niger Delta. Tinubu appoints Momoh as minister designate for Niger Delta. Well, of course, some would say the president has actually bowed to the pressure of Pandef and other stakeholders from that region. You can pick up a copy of the Vanguard, and of course, you see all of that story. Before we go, move on to other people, let's look at the last story on the front page of the Vanguard. Old age poverty to increase as pension coverage stagnates, population rises. The story is inside Vanguard newspaper. Just pick up a copy, and of course you see what that is all about. Okay, so we move on to the Punch this morning. Of course, let's see what the Punch is leading with this morning. FG prioritizes economy security as ministers take oath today. FG prioritizes economy security as ministers take oath today. That story is on page 2 and 46 of the Punch this morning. Well, currently the minister designates are taking oath of office, and of course you would get more on that if you log on to our website www.vanguardnigerian.com for more stories on all of that. Okay, so let's quickly look at another story making rounds on the front page of the Vanguard. Farmers abandon farms as 23 Sokoto, Zamfara, KB, LGs on the bandits. That's a very pathetic one, and of course it can also lead to more food crisis. Farmers abandon farms, 23 Sokoto, Zamfara, KB, LGs on the bandits. That is not a good news, but of course you can pick up a copy of the Punch to see more on that story. Okay, let's quickly move on to the Guardian and see what the Guardian has for us this morning. Of course, it's coming with a very interesting infograph, of course, which is actually talking about sanctions against Niger. Well, of course, you pick up a copy of Guardian and see what that is all about. 7 states in dire straits, economic losses over border closure. That is what the Guardian is leading with this morning. Now, of course, pick up a copy of the Guardian, and of course you see what that is all about. Okay, so let's move on to our last newspaper today, and that is the Nation. The Nation also is talking about the ministers, the cabinet, or if you like, the reassigns ministerial portfolio to some of the minister designates. And of course, it's starting with Tinubu reassigns Oyetola to Marine, Momoh to Niger Delta. Tinubu reassigns Oyetola to Marine and Momoh to Niger Delta. I'm afraid that's all we have for you on the front page of the dailies today. We will be back shortly when we begin the analysis, of course, with somebody who is very, very, interesting. And of course, he's going to be providing us with deeper insight into some of these major, major headlines making the rounds on the national dailies across Nigeria this morning. Do not go away. We'll be back shortly. All right, welcome back. Of course, it's still today in the news here on Vanguard Live, broadcasting to you from the beautiful city of Lagos, Southwest Nigeria. Well, this morning we have a very, very interesting guest, joining us live from Zoom today in the person of Mr. Abdul Jalil. He was the former FCT NUJ chairman of the FCT, and of course is with us this morning. I think we would be back shortly because he seemed to be having some network problem going on with him. Okay, so like we were discussing, the newspaper, the some of the headlines are, making the rounds. Of course, are very interesting, and as we said earlier, that ministers are currently taking oaths of office as we speak. We're still having issue getting across to Mr. Abdul. Okay, so I think we have him now, Mr. Abdul Jalil. Good morning to you.
Good morning, sir.
Right. Well, thanks
Good morning to you as well.
Yeah, thanks for having you again on the show. We are glad to have you back again this morning.
I'm happy to be with you.
Yeah, okay, so a lot is happening currently, in the country. But before I take you to, some of the lead stories on the front, dailies in Nigeria today. Currently, ministers in Nigeria, forming the cabinet of the new administration, are currently taking oath of office, as we speak. Please tell us, what are your thoughts, concerning the incoming ministers?
They are very green and they are two ways. But the thing is that it's not whether you have an understanding that you can perform better. Justice and education, water resources, the professionals that are handling these ministries.
From your end, but of course we'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. But of course, if you're just joining us, of course it's still today in the news, and Mr. Abdul Jalil, the chairman of the NUJ, has been telling us what are his thoughts currently as the ministers take oath. Of course, he said that aside for the minister of FCT and of course a few others, he is not really optimistic of seeing any difference, in the administration. Of course, we hope that the 8-point agenda of the administration of course, the 8-point agenda of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, as it were, guides this minister to performing credibly well. Well, we also will look at what's really happening in the Niger Republic. Just yesterday, the ECOWAS rejected the junta's 3 years transition, and of course, that really means we need to keep our hands forward and see what is coming out of that region. Well, of course, as it were now, it seems that all diplomatic efforts seem to have failed, but of course, we would see what comes out after this rejection from ECOWAS. Well, of course, another thing that is really, really of concern to Nigerians is the fact that about 23 local governments, combined from Sokoto State, KB, and of course a few other states is under bandit control, as reported by the Punch newspaper. And of course, that is really giving farmers concern, and of course that might actually worsen, the food crisis that is currently bedeviling the country as it were. Well, we hope that the minister designate for security have a solution to banditry in that part of Nigeria. Okay, let's look at one other thing before we call it a day. Of course, in Nigeria, where we're looking at old age poverty increases as pension coverage stagnates and population rises. Of course, we hope that the current minister who is going to man the Nigerian economy see to this, because you don't want to work for 35 years and, of course, end up in penury as a result of some harsh, pension policies that that people are currently facing. But of course, before we go, we'd like to take one more from the elder statesman, and that's coming from Mr. Edwin Clark, who is talking today on Vanguard, is saying that many governors wealthier than their states. Well, I do not have facts. Well, I do not know where the elder statesman Chief Edwin Clark got his information from. But of course, if you pick up a copy of the Vanguard, you would see that story above the nameplate of the Vanguard, and of course you can get more insight into what he meant by saying that some governors are actually wealthier than their states. Okay, so I'm afraid we call it a day today. Of course, tomorrow we would be having another interesting guest who is going to be doing us, a lot of favor by giving us, very nice and sweet insight, on some of the stories that are making rounds. Of course, we have to apologize over the poor network that we experienced while talking to Mr. Abdul Jalil from Abuja. Well, of course, that's all we have for you today. Do not forget to follow us on all our platforms showing currently on your screen. And of course, like and share this video so that others can see what is trending in Nigeria today and indeed around the world. My name remains Idowu Bankole, and it is bye.